Hi everyone. Herzlich willkommen zur allerersten Folge der Very British Actually Book Corner. Für alle, die mich noch nicht kennen, mein Name ist Andrea, kurz auch Ria, und ich bin angehende Kultur- und Reisejournalistin mit Schwerpunkt Großbritannien. Auf meiner Facebook-Seite Very British Actually teile ich Wissenswertes und Schönes über Culture, Travel, Films, TV-Shows, Books and more. Da ich seit einiger Zeit zudem in London lebe, habe ich auch ein besonderes Interesse daran, euch an Insider-Tipps teilhaben zu lassen, die ich als Locals in der UK entdecke. Büchern möchte ich mit der Very British Actually Book Corner nun einen ganz besonderen Platz einräumen und euch dabei tolle britische Autoren vorstellen, die in Großbritannien schon enorm erfolgreich sind, in Deutschland allerdings größtenteils noch echte Geheimtipps sind. Mein erster Gast in der Book Corner heute ist die schottische Krimiautorin Marion Todd, deren erster Roman Außerdem seit dem 2. August auch unter dem deutschen Titel Die Nummern des Todes erhältlich ist. In unserem Gespräch erzählt Marion mehr über sich und ihre Schriftstellerkarriere, und außerdem gibt sie auch interessante Informationen über ihre Krimireihe sowie das wunderschöne Schottland-Preis. Und damit herzlich willkommen in der Very British Actually Book Corner, Marion Todd. Yeah, it's so lovely to have you. And yeah, it would be great if you could just tell us a bit about who you are, what you do as a writer, and yeah, just
Lovely. Thank you so much for making me so welcome, and I'm really delighted to be your very first guest. I'm really honoured. My name is Marion Todd, and I'm a Scottish crime writer living in Northeast Fife in Scotland. You may also hear dog sounds in the background. That's my dog Zeus, who is wandering around and occasionally may pop up to say hello or kind of do something. Oh, he's nudging me at the moment, so I'll just give him a pat. I write a detective series. My detective is called Clare Mackay, and the series is Police Procedural, which means it's written from the point of view of the investigating police officer. And the books are set in a lovely historic town, St Andrews, in Northeast Fife, which is only about 11 miles from my home. Clare Mackay is the main character, and she has a sidekick who is called Chris West. And they're fairly different, but they rub along together. And there are now 6 books in the series. The last one, published in English, Old Bones Lie, came out just about 3 weeks ago today. And there's going to be 2 books published in German language, and I will leave Ria to pronounce them properly. The first one comes out next month on the 2nd of August, and the second one is on the 6th of December.
lovely. So yeah, the first one is, the German version is called Die Nummern des Todes, which is a very lovely title, and I think quite fitting if you look at the books. But we're going to talk about that in a moment. And your second book, which is in plain sight in English, and in German, it's going to be called Der lauernde Tod.
You say that so much better than I ever could.
Right. So, Marion, you are now a full-time writer of these lovely books. But you weren't always a full-time writer, although I've read in your bio that you were always keen to be a writer. It would be lovely if you could tell us a bit what you did before and how that inspired your books as well.
Okay, well, before starting to write full-time, I mean, I have always written. I think most people who are writers have written most of their lives, and I'm no different to that. And I tried my hand at writing for children, and I did win a short story for children competition. I wrote some bits for the local newspaper and some short stories in magazines, but I always thought that a novel was a little bit beyond me. But I'll come to how that came to be in just a moment. I have had a variety of office jobs, and then I went to work as a college lecturer where I stayed until I took early retirement. But in between that, I was always doing other bits and pieces. I had a garden plants business for a while that I was doing at weekends and evenings. And then I moved into making candles, which is yes, I know. It's actually connected to the plants in a weird sort of way, because we had a really, really bad summer one year and I couldn't sell as many plants. It just rained. And so I thought, right, what can I do with these? I'll cut all the heads off and use the petals to make potpourri. So I started investigating this and learned, how to dry them properly and to use a fixative to kind of add some fragrance to them. And the people I was going to buy these things also sold wax. And I thought, gosh, I might try some candles as well. And then I started a candle business and did that for probably about 5 years. It was great fun.
Wow,
but,
cool.
It was kind of, there's various reasons why I gave it up. One or two things kind of, they stopped manufacturing the wax that I used. And that's a big problem because every single wax behaves differently. And I couldn't be bothered starting to try and test them all again because I had 26 different kind of candles in like 3 different configurations, kind of tea lights and this container and that container. And there's a lot of testing goes on. And I thought, nah, I don't fancy that. And by that stage, I was thinking about taking early retirement from work. And I had this idea for a novel knocking about in my head. And this had come about because it never upset a crime writer. I really, really wanted to kill someone, a real person. And somebody who had just been very, very nasty to me when I was a young student. And this was a tutor who was horrible to me. Should have known better. And even now, I sort of can remember how that man made me feel. And I thought, right, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to put him in a novel and I'm going to kill him and I'm going to let the killer get away with it. So I wrote that novel and it was quite a cathartic experience. It kind of got this out of my system in a way. And I realized that by the time I had finished it, I wasn't sure if the novel was going to be okay. But because I had this man killed and there had to be a police investigation, quite by the way, I had created this minor character who was a detective inspector called Clare Mackay.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I've got Claire and I've got her sidekick and so on. I've set it in St Andrews, which is quite near my home. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Right. So I thought, right, I'd made some mistakes writing that novel. I knew I had. And I'd learned quite a lot in the process. I thought, I'm going to start again. And this time it's going to be a police procedural novel. Claire is going to be the central character. And I think I decided for the first one, I would start with a serial killer. I do tend not to write too many novels with serial killers because it becomes a bit of a trope and I think can become a little bit unrealistic, particularly in a small town like St Andrews, which has not got a very big population. So what I tend to do is I look at things that might make ordinary people act in an extreme way, rather than creating this crazed person who's running around determined to kill everyone. I like to put ordinary people under pressure and watch as they react and see what they do. And that's the premise of the books. I then started sending it out and was very lucky to be signed by an agent. I was quite close to thinking I was going to self-publish. I had thought, when 2019 dawns, I'm going to self-publish if I've not been signed. And I got a letter from an agent or an email from an agent in December 2018. So I was that close to self-publishing. Wow. And then I signed with my publishers in the UK, who are Canelo. They're not publishing the German edition, that's Amazon in Germany. But they signed me up for 3 books and then another 3 books. And I've just signed a contract for another 3. So there's going to be 9 altogether at the moment anyway. We'll see.
That's really, really brilliant. Congratulations on that one again, Marion.
Thank you very much.
Really, really brilliant. So, as you said, so Claire was more of a side product of Absolutely. Your first novel.
Yes.
Did you have any inspiration though for her when you created her?
Yes, I did. I've known a lot of police officers over the years. I was married for very many years to a police officer, very happily married. And what kind of happens is if police officers are working in the centre of a town, as my husband did, they tend not to socialise in town. So we never went clubbing or anything like that because you might meet someone that you've had some problems with. So we tended to socialise with other police officers and their wives and girlfriends or partners, whatever. And I got to know lots of them. And without a doubt, there were some who behaved the way they shouldn't. But the vast majority of them were hardworking, good-hearted people just trying to do a good job. And I wanted to reflect that because it's always the stories of these quite shockingly bad officers. I'm not defending them at all. The ones who hit the news, they should not be in the job. Some of them should be in prison. But I did want to reflect the fact that they are in a minority and that the vast majority of the officers are just lovely and hardworking people. So when I created Claire, I didn't want to make her a real maverick or someone that goes against the rules. I wanted to make her a real person who has problems at home and comes to work and tries to do a good job, doesn't always get it right, but it's just a bit like me, I think, channeling my own shortcomings and also giving her things that I think I would quite like to have, like really good hair, and she can run very fast, which I can't. So I kind of wanted to do that and make her an amalgam of everything that I think a good police officer should be, without making her too saintly. She does get things wrong and she loses her temper, as we all do. So that's where she came from, really, my history, knowing lots of different officers.
But that must have been a very helpful experience when you went into writing, not only because you knew people, but also because you've lived with someone that close. Yes. So you kind of had an insight in a way that probably makes them.
It helps when you think about the dialogue and the way that the officers speak to each other. Quite often on TV, you'll see people referring to senior officers as sir or ma'am. I mean, it just doesn't happen now. It really doesn't. It may have done, kind of 30 years ago, but unless you get someone who's incredibly pedantic, it tends to be a much more first name kind of thing. So just things like that, but also, the black humor. I don't write a lot of, excuse me, she knows, I don't write a lot of humor in the books, but sometimes it'll just be one-liners that come straight from things that I have heard in my past, and it just naturally flows out because when I'm writing the characters, I'm thinking of the officers that I knew over the years.
That is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And there's obviously, of course, another major character in your books, which is your setting. So you said that you were always thinking of setting your books in St Andrews or in your local area. Was it particular because you live in the area, or was it also because you thought it was just a brilliant area where you could set crimes and where you could have people hide things, or was it just the setting itself that was just so appealing to you?
It's all of that. It's definitely all of that. The original idea to set it in St Andrews, because I wasn't brought up in St Andrews. I lived there for a short time, but I do live quite close now. The idea came from watching and also reading, but watching the Inspector Morse series on UK TV. The TV series isn't entirely the same as the books. Some books were made into episodes for the TV series, and others were written for the series. But what comes through very strongly is a sense of Oxford and this beautiful university town. And I know myself, having lived in St Andrews for a while, that there can be tensions between what we call town and gown, the population and the students. And St Andrews also has the added kind of influence of tourists and golf. We've just had the 150th Open Golf Championship, and the town, there's just hundreds of thousands of people descended on this very small town. I didn't go anywhere near it because it would just be unbearable. It was so busy. But, so it's got such potential for such a small place. And because it's quite local to me, I can quite easily pop over there to check things out. And I know buildings and I know kind of places where people hang out. Having said that, there are problems with using such a small town. I've published 6 books. The 7th is written. And I'm starting to run out of places to kill people because it is quite a small town. And we'll have Claire and Chris, her sidekick, going to interview people. And I'm thinking, I've had somebody in that street before. I've had someone there before. Where can I send them this time? So I'm having to branch out into the kind of surrounding small towns and villages and use them a bit. The other thing about St Andrews is that it doesn't have a police mortuary. It has a hospital, but a very small hospital, mainly day cases. So there are, and even the police station in reality doesn't have an inspector. So Claire wouldn't exist in real life, but I'm making it up, so I can do what I like.
Yes.
And it's quite fun, to do. I do use the real police station, but I can tell you something quite funny about my first book, which is Die Nummern des Todes.
Die Nummern des Todes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When I wrote that, I hadn't realised that a new police station had been built. It was a little bit out of date there. So I was writing on the basis of the old one, which is a completely different part of town. So once I realised this, I had to rewrite lots of scenes because I couldn't have Claire coming out and going in one direction when she was in the wrong place. So that was, thank goodness I realised in time. Otherwise, that people would have been sending me emails and telling me I'd got it wrong. But it's a lovely, lovely town. It has an atmosphere of its own. And I'm glad you agree it's a character in the book, because to me it very much is. And I kind of like to just sit down and think to myself, right, where in the town am I just now? And then the writing hopefully sometimes flows from that. Excuse me.
No problem. So yeah, now that we've already kind of come back to your first book, See Them Run, or Die Nummern des Todes. So Marion, maybe you could tell us a bit more about the story itself, how it kicks off, and maybe also then give us a bit more details about Claire, so we kind of know a bit more about her.
Right, okay. The book opens not from Claire's point of view, but at a wedding. And it's quite common in Scotland to have a ceilidh at a wedding after the kind of the meal and everything. And this is a Scottish country dance, which will go on until midnight, depends on the license of the hotel, whether they can have late night things. Sometimes they go on into very early in the morning. And the more the evening goes on, the more alcohol is consumed, the wilder the dancing gets, and they're great fun. And I decided that I would have one of the wedding guests, this man, sitting out for one of the dances, watching the dancers, and then his phone buzzes, and it's a text from someone he doesn't know saying, "I like your kilt." And then a bit of flirting goes on. He doesn't know who the number is, but he's a bit of a ladies' man. And he thinks to himself, well, it could be one of a few. So there's a bit of text flirting goes on. And eventually one of the messages says, "Come down, I'm at the bottom of the drive, come now." So he looks around to see everybody's busy. So he slips out and he goes down the drive, and he sees a car headlights and he thinks, oh, this is it, and he goes around, it's a kind of curving drive. And then suddenly the car lurches forward and he turns to try and run, but it hits him. And then it backs over him again and drives off, and he's dead. And Claire is called out to have a look at this, and they don't quite know what's happened or who might have done it, but they interview everyone and then off they go. And the following night, another man is run down just at the edge of his drive. He lives in a house just on the outskirts of St Andrews. He's out walking his dog last thing at night, and he's run over and left for dead. And the thing that the two have in common is that the first man has a number 5 pinned to his chest, and they don't know why. And then the second man, who's found with his dog, the dog is not harmed, the dog is fine. Has a number 4, yes, don't kill the dog, never kill the dog. He has a number 4 pinned to his chest. And Claire then realises there's some sort of lethal countdown going on here, and there's probably another 3 victims to come. And they don't know why, they don't know what's going on. So they start to investigate. As the story goes on, Claire is new in town, and that was a deliberate device that I used because it let me show the readers the setting through and explain things through Claire asking her colleagues, how do I get to this thing? What do you do about that? Although she is the detective inspector, she's feeling her way in the town. So that was quite a useful device to, without having to constantly go into paragraphs of description. It let me show the reader where she was going, what she was doing, and so on. And in the course of the investigation, we get a little bit of insight into Claire's background and the fact that she has come to St Andrews from a very large city in Scotland, Glasgow, where she had been a firearms officer, and she had shot and killed a young lad who was toting a weapon. The problem was when they recovered the body, they recovered the weapon, and it was a replica. So she was never in any danger. And there was an investigation and so on. So all of this is brought out as the story progresses. So we're learning about Claire as well as watching her investigate potentially 5 murders.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I have to say, the opening is just amazing. So when I read it, I really, really loved that, because it's usually people do start off with either the murderer or with a detective. And I thought it was a brilliant way to just start off with, first of all, this really very Scottish tradition, which already gives the reader an insight into where they are.
It grounds the book in Scotland.
Yes, absolutely. And then also this thing happens where the victim doesn't really see it coming, but you don't really feel bad that because he's not really a nice man. So
it's awful, it's dreadful. Yeah, I can tell you an interesting story about that. Before I sent the book off to the person who's to become my agent, and various other agents as well, all of whom said, no, how dare they? I had sent it to an editor, and he gave me some advice. And one of the things he said, originally, the text message came in, and it was straight away inviting Andy, our first victim, to go outside for a liaison. And up he gets and he goes. And this editor had the idea, which I thought was so clever, of breaking that up into several text exchanges and interspersing it with what was going on in the room. So you get a little bit, because that's what would happen. You'd get a little bit of a message and you'd reply. You wouldn't get a reply straight away. So you're watching what's going on in the room, and then the phone would buzz again. And it delays it makes the reader think, well, come on, let's get on with it. What's going on? Is he going outside? So it delays the gratification. And I thought that was such a clever trick. And I'm very, very grateful to that editor, because I think that made the opening so much better. And when you're sending a book out to an agent or a publisher, you need to grab them at the start, because that's what we do in bookshops. We go and we pick a book off the shelf, we look at it, and if the first page doesn't grab us, we put it back and move on. So that's very important for writers. Make sure that first page, it doesn't have to be action-packed, but there has to be something that intrigues the reader and makes them think, oh, and they turn another page. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. But that's brilliant that you had.
It's a good idea, wasn't it? I mean,
yes, absolutely. And also because I really loved the way he was looking around the room and then describing all the other people that then are later interviewed by Claire and her team.
Yes.
So you already get a glimpse of who's there. So you can kind of think, oh, it's maybe someone sneaking out, or, those people standing around having a cigarette. Is someone going there and then getting the car? So yeah, I think that really is a brilliant way to open the book.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So yeah, you've already told us a bit about why you chose the setting, but since Very British actually is also very much about culture and travel, I just thought that that you tell us a bit about where exactly you are in Scotland, so people first of all get a bit of an idea what's the closest city, and then also maybe some sightseeing tips or places where you would say this is go-to places, or places that they might find if they read your books. So you would say, okay, if you go there, this is a great place, and you find it in my books as well. So
I'd love to become a tour guide for Scotland.
Yes.
As I said at the start, I'm in Scotland, in a county called Fife, which is probably about halfway up Scotland, maybe not quite. My nearest city is Dundee, which is the 4th largest city in Scotland, and a few years ago became home to the 2nd V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum. And we've got this very modern, quirky building that sits on the River Tay, which separates Dundee from Fife. And it's very well worth going to see. So if you're coming up this far and you cross the River Tay, you should definitely visit the V&A in Dundee. But I'm in Fife, I'm across the water from Dundee, and as I said, about 11 miles from St Andrews, which is home to one of the oldest universities in the world. It's not like a typical campus that you might see in a more modern university. The buildings are scattered throughout the town. So you might have a university building, a house that's been bought over by the university, and then next door to that someone will live, or there might be a cafe, and then there'll be another university building. So they're all over the town, scattered about. And the thing that tourists often notice is that the students wear quite distinctive red gowns. Not all of them, I mean, but some do, some don't. And interestingly, the way that the gown is worn will tell you which year the student is in. So if the gown is fully up over the shoulders, it's a first year student. If it's off one shoulder, it's second year. If it's off the other, it's third year. And if it's off both, it's a fourth year student. So that's your bit of trivia. St Andrews has a ruined castle and a cathedral, again ruined, and a lovely, I suppose it's a cathedral as well, St Sylvester's, where which you can go in and have a look. It's absolutely beautiful, really worth a look. And it has 2 amazing ice cream shops, one called Luvian's and one called Giannetta's. If you then venture south out of St Andrews, you can walk along the Fife Coastal Path, which takes you through lovely villages, takes you through kind of north of St Andrews and south towards an area of Fife called the East Neuk. And that's a collection of little fishing villages. And it's probably one of the most expensive places to buy a property in Scotland now. It's become very, very popular and collectible. Very difficult for locals to buy a house because people who live in Edinburgh, which is probably about 20 miles further on, will often buy themselves a little weekend pad to live in to come and spend their weekends or their holidays in the East Neuk. So Edinburgh, as I say, is further south, and it's Scotland's capital city. It has a castle with a piper, and at 1 o'clock each day there'll be a cannon is fired to tell people that it's 1 o'clock. So the locals are well used to hearing that. And then if you cross over to the west coast of Scotland, you come to Glasgow, which is Scotland's largest city. It's not the capital, but it is the largest city by population. And Glasgow has some wonderful, wonderful buildings in it. It's well worth going to see. It's a bit more spread out than Edinburgh in terms of where all the nice places are, but it's known as the Deer Green Place because it has so many parks and trees and things. It's a lovely city. And then further north, you can choose to go up the west, kind of past Loch Lomond and up to kind of Argyllshire, towards the Hebrides, the islands, Skye and Lewis and Harris. Or you can go further to the east and go up the A9, which takes you into the Cairngorms and Highland towns like Inverness, and further on until you come to the very top of Scotland, John O'Groats. It's quite a long way to John O'Groats. It really is And then beyond that, there's Orkney and Shetland as well. So there's a lot of travelling to be done in what looks like a very small country. But it's so worth visiting. I would urge you to come to Scotland because you've got a warm welcome. We're very friendly, and there's such lovely places to see as well. We don't have an autobahn, which means that it'll take a bit longer to go places. Sometimes the roads will be what we call a single track road with passing places, which means there isn't room for you and the car coming towards you to go side by side. So someone has to reverse. Sometimes it's a game of nerves. Someone has to reverse to the nearest passing place. And increasingly, camper vans, which are huge, are going along these narrow roads and causing one or two traffic jams. But it's all good fun. You come to visit, you just take your time.
Sounds lovely.
It is lovely. I love it.
Very, very much. I think lots of people are, if they have been to Scotland, are really keen to go now.
Good, I hope so. I hope I've done a bit for the tourist.
Yes, you definitely did. Thank you so much, Marion, for coming on to the Book Corner.
It's been great fun. I've really loved it.
I really, really enjoyed the chat that we had. And I'm going to pop in the descriptions below all the necessary links that you will need to find Marion's books and her website, social media, so anything you can connect or follow her. And then on the 2nd of August, her first book, Die Nummern des Todes, definitely worth buying. So
I wish I could say it like that.
I'm going to practice that, and when the second book comes out, you just come again.
Will do. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to talk to you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.